The flames were already licking the air by the time I ran outside, barefoot, panicked, clutching a paper plate with half-frosted cupcakes. The screams had started seconds before, sharp and high-pitched like shattered glass, followed by my daughter's wailing voice, raw, broken, calling out for me. The world slowed as I stepped into the yard and saw it. Her birthday gifts engulfed in fire, wrapping paper curled into black ash midair, and the once colorful bows that she had so carefully admired that morning shriveled like dry leaves in the heat. The helium balloons that danced in celebration only minutes earlier had burst into blaze, their fragments strewn across the grass like confetti from a horror show. I dropped the plate. It hit the pavement with a soft splatter. My eyes locked onto my daughter. She was on her knees, trembling, her tiny fingers gripping the edge of her walker, her cheeks wet and streaked with tears. She wasn't just crying, she was gasping for breath, repeating the same words over and over like a chant soaked in disbelief. Why? Why would she do this? And then I saw her, Karen, standing off to the side, arms folded across her chest like she was supervising a yard sale. No remorse, no shock, just cold detachment in her eyes, as if this act of destruction was somehow justified, as if setting fire to a disabled child's birthday dreams was some form of neighborhood justice. People had come out by then. Neighbors stood on their porches, phones raised, some filming, others frozen. One woman tried to grab her child and walk back inside, shielding the little one's eyes. A man from 2 houses down shouted, "Call 911," but no one moved fast enough. The fire wasn't massive, but it was enough to be terrifying, enough to turn a front yard into a nightmare. I dropped to my knees beside my daughter, wrapping my arms around her shaking frame. Her favorite stuffed unicorn, a birthday present from her uncle, was lying nearby. Charred, its white for now scorched gray. I pulled it toward us as if it would somehow comfort her, but she pushed it away and sobbed harder. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tear Karen apart with words that couldn't form fast enough in my throat. But all I could do in that moment was hold my daughter and rock her gently as the fire hissed and crackled in the background, like it had a voice of its own, mocking cruel final. Karen took a slow step forward. Her voice cut through the air like a serrated blade. "You should have followed the rules," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "This is not a place for chaos." I turned toward her, stunned, heart pounding in my chest like it was trying to escape. "You burned her gifts," I whispered, my voice quivering with fury. She tilted her head, shrugged. "She doesn't deserve them," she muttered, barely above a whisper, but I heard it. I heard every venomous syllable. "That little girl doesn't deserve any of this." My daughter whimpered beside me. That was it. That sentence, so heartless, so casual, hit like a wrecking ball. I stood up, the ground swaying under my feet, and pointed at her, my hands trembling. "You think because you hide behind HOA rules, you get to decide who deserves happiness?" I shouted. "She's a child. She's a human being. And you're a monster." Someone finally ran over with a garden hose, spraying the smoldering pile as sirens howled in the distance. A few neighbors started whispering, murmuring things like "unbelievable" and "she's gone too far this time." But others remained silent, eyes darting away, afraid to get involved. That's how it always was in this neighborhood, truth buried under the comfort of silence, injustice masked with polite smiles and unspoken alliances. As the fire died down, the smoke lingered in the air, heavy and suffocating. My daughter's birthday banner, once stretched proudly across the porch, now dangled by a single corner, burned, torn, like the memory of the day we'd tried to create. The fire truck arrived, too late to stop the damage, but just in time to see the aftermath. The firefighters asked a few questions, but Karen stayed calm, like she'd rehearsed for this moment. She denied everything, of course, said she saw the fire and came out to help, claimed it must have been a malfunctioning sparkler or candle. My daughter looked up at me then, her eyes puffy and red but burning with a question that had no real answer. "Mommy, did I do something bad?" I broke. Right there on that burnt patch of grass, surrounded by a half-eaten cake, melted toys, and neighbors who would rather film than speak up, I broke. I knelt back down, pulled her to my chest, and whispered, "No, sweetheart, you did everything right. You are perfect. This is not your fault." But deep inside, something had changed. This wasn't just about a ruined birthday. This wasn't about Karen's cruelty or HOA rules. This was about how far someone would go to destroy joy because of a child they couldn't understand, because of difference, because of intolerance disguised as order. And in that moment, I knew this was only the beginning. From the very beginning, all we ever wanted was peace, a home where laughter could echo down the halls, where our daughter could grow up feeling safe, loved, and completely herself. Life hadn't been easy for us, but it was never about ease. It was about intention. When our daughter, Emily, was born, we didn't know the path we were about to walk. Her birth was quiet, gentle, almost like the world tiptoed into the room to welcome her. She was delicate, beautiful, with the brightest eyes I'd ever seen, but there was something different, something the doctors noticed quickly. Over the next few months, words like neuromuscular delay, mobility challenges, and lifelong support began to fill our conversations. I won't lie and say it didn't shake us at first, but Emily was never a burden. She was light, she was joy, and every day she taught us how to see life through the lens of resilience. She needed a little more time to walk, a little more help to speak clearly, and some tools to move around freely. But her spirit? That needed no assistance. She radiated warmth, kindness, and a type of gentleness this world doesn't always know what to do with. When Emily turned 5, we made a decision that felt monumental. We were going to move. Our old neighborhood was fine, but the apartment was cramped, the elevators unreliable, and the building barely met accessibility standards. We wanted a place where Emily could roam without constant fear of steps or obstacles, a backyard she could call her own, and neighbors who wouldn't look at her with pity or confusion, but with kindness and maybe even friendship. That dream led us to Willow Ridge. On paper, it was perfect, a quiet cul-de-sac in a suburban neighborhood, lined with modest homes, neatly trimmed lawns, and families who wave from their porches. The houses weren't flashy, but they were well cared for. The streets were wide, ideal for Emily's walker, and the local school was known for its inclusion programs. There was even a small park nearby with accessible swings, and I remember the way Emily's face lit up when she saw them for the first time. It felt like we had found our fresh start. The house we bought wasn't big, but it had character. An old oak tree in the front yard, creaky wooden floors, and a sunroom that became Emily's reading nook. She called it her castle, and we filled it with cushions, fairy lights, and picture books. Every corner of that home echoed with new beginnings. We spent weekends painting walls, hanging up family photos, planting flowers in the front yard that Emily chose herself, mostly pink and purple ones. Slowly, the house began to feel like ours, and our hearts began to relax just a little. Life felt normal in a way we hadn't experienced in a long time. The neighborhood operated under an HOA, Homeowners Association, which at first seemed like a formality. The welcome packet came with a thick binder of rules. No loud music after 8 p.m. Garbage bins must be stored out of sight. Lawn maintenance must occur weekly. Holiday decorations must be removed within 2 weeks of the event. It was rigid, sure, but nothing unmanageable. We figured as long as we followed the guidelines, we'd be fine. Besides, the board seemed organized and the neighborhood clean and orderly, so we accepted it as part of the price for peace. That's when we met Karen. She lived across the street, single in her mid-50s, crisp wardrobe, manicured lawn that looked like it belonged in a catalog. She introduced herself with a tight smile and a firm handshake. "Welcome to the neighborhood," she said. "We like to keep things orderly around here." At the time, it sounded more like a friendly heads-up than a warning. She even brought over a tin of homemade cookies, which we later found out she gave to all new residents. We thanked her, exchanged pleasantries, and in those first few days, I allowed myself to believe that everything was going to work out. Karen wasn't rude at first. She wasn't warm either, but she masked her coldness with the sort of professionalism that makes it hard to call out. When she first saw Emily, she gave her a polite smile, but her eyes lingered on the walker, then quickly flicked back to me with something unreadable in them. I tried to brush it off. Not everyone knows how to respond to difference, and I wasn't expecting everyone to embrace us immediately. Emily, ever the hopeful one, waved at her the next day with her usual, "Hi, neighbor." Karen responded with a stiff nod and walked her car. Still, I gave her the benefit of the doubt. We had just moved in. Maybe she was just busy. The first real tension came about 3 weeks later when Emily and I decorated our small porch with spring flowers and handmade wind chimes. Emily loved arts and crafts, and the wind chimes had little butterflies painted in her favorite colors. That evening, a note was taped to our door. Please review HOA regulations. Unapproved decorative items are discouraged. Let's keep the community uniform. It wasn't signed, but I didn't need a signature to know who left it. I sighed, removed the chimes, and explained to Emily that some people just like things a certain way. She didn't fully understand, and honestly, neither did I, but I didn't want to stir trouble. We were new, we were different, and I was determined to protect our little peace bubble. Over the months, more subtle slights followed. An anonymous report about improper trash bin placement when our bin was delayed by a day due to Emily's therapy appointment. A call from the HOA asking us to consider keeping guest traffic minimal, though we'd only hosted Emily's cousins for a weekend. Every time, the interaction was polished, indirect, but personal enough that it left a sting. I began to see Karen not as the rule follower she claimed to be, but as the self-appointed gatekeeper of a neighborhood she saw as hers to mold. Still, I tried to find the balance, to comply without losing our individuality, to assert ourselves without setting off alarms. And then came Emily's 7th birthday. She'd been planning it for months, circling dates on the calendar, drawing invitations, asking if her friends from school could come. It was going to be our first real celebration in the new home. I promised her balloons, a little music, cupcakes, and games. We even asked a local therapy pony group to make an appearance, just for 30 minutes, to make the day special. Emily beamed when I told her. It was the first time since our move that I saw her completely open, excited, and unguarded. We filed the necessary request with the HOA weeks in advance, provided all the details, and received a generic approval. Everything seemed on track. Karen, of course, made her presence felt. The day before the party, she approached me while I was setting up a small tent in the backyard. Just a reminder, she said, voice smooth but tight, this is a peaceful neighborhood. We'd all appreciate it if you kept the festivities under control. I forced a smile and replied, it's just a children's party. She smiled back, but there was no kindness in it, only control. That night, I sat on the edge of Emily's bed, brushing her hair, listening to her talk about the ponies and the cake, and the surprise she hoped her dad had planned. I looked at her, so full of trust, so unaware of the pettiness and prejudice lurking just beyond our fence, and I prayed silently that tomorrow would be good. That, for once, nothing would go wrong. But I should have known better. Peace in this neighborhood wasn't given, it was something we were expected to earn, to beg for, to fight for, and people like Karen had already decided we didn't deserve it. At first, the hostility didn't scream. It whispered. It crept in like a cold draft under a closed door, quiet, almost ignorable, until you began to feel the chill deep in your bones. Karen's attitude wasn't openly confrontational in the beginning. She didn't yell or slam doors. Instead, she used the HOA rulebook as a weapon and her tone as a scalpel. It started with small things, easy to overlook, almost laughable. The first time was during a Sunday afternoon, 2 months before Emily's birthday. We were decorating the front yard with a few paper lanterns Emily had painted herself. It was her new favorite thing, bright colors, shapes of animals and flowers, dangling just under the porch lights. Emily stood proudly next to me, grinning from ear to ear, while I tied string to the hooks. That evening, I found a note in our mailbox. Please be advised that decorative lighting must be approved by the HOA in advance. Let's all work together to preserve our community's standard appearance. Thank you. No name. No signature. just perfectly typed, folded neatly. I would have brushed it off if it weren't for the fact that 2 houses down, the Johnsons had lanterns up for weeks. Nobody ever complained about theirs. And then there were the stairs. They weren't obvious at first, just lingering glances when Emily used her walker to move down the sidewalk or when she needed a bit more time to climb up the community park slide with my help. Karen and a few others like her would look, hold their gaze for a moment too long, then glance away like they'd seen something out of place. One afternoon, I saw Karen watching us from behind her blinds while Emily tried to ride her adapted tricycle. When Emily waved enthusiastically at her window, Karen didn't wave back. She simply closed the blinds. It escalated from glances to comments. One day, while walking Emily to the mailbox, we ran into Karen by her hedge. She gave us a tight smile and said, "She's brave, isn't she? It must be difficult to keep up with all her needs." I blinked, unsure how to respond. Brave? Needs? Emily was standing right there, clutching my hand, eyes darting between us like she knew something wasn't quite right, but couldn't place it. I smiled through my teeth and replied, "She's perfect." Karen nodded slowly, like I hadn't quite understood her. That's when I realized these weren't well-intentioned comments. They were polished prejudice. Then came the noise complaint. It was a Saturday morning, mid-April. Emily had 2 of her cousins over, and they were playing in the backyard with chalk and a small Bluetooth speaker playing children's songs. The volume wasn't loud. It wasn't even high enough to hear from the front yard. But at 11:47 a.m., I got an email from the HOA. A concerned resident has reported disruptive noise levels from your property. Please ensure compliance with our quiet hours policy and be mindful of your neighbors. I checked the policy. Quiet hours didn't begin until 8 p.m. When I inquired who submitted the complaint, the response was vague. We do not disclose individual complainants for privacy reasons. Of course, privacy was only a privilege for the ones doing the damage. The messages continued. Notes about how long our garbage bins sat outside, sometimes just a few hours after pickup, warnings about excessive chalk drawings on our driveway from Emily's hopscotch games, and even a complaint that our front door wreath was too colorful and not seasonally appropriate. Emily had made that wreath herself at school. She had placed it on the door with such pride. I took it down that night with a lump in my throat, telling her gently, "We'll save it for later, maybe for a special holiday." She nodded, but her little face fell. The worst part wasn't just the rules, it was how selectively they were enforced. The Andersons had a permanent lawn ornament shaped like a gnome, and nobody ever sent them a complaint. The Rosens' teenage son played guitar on his front steps loudly every evening. No notes, no warnings. But when I let Emily set up a lemonade stand on a sunny afternoon, we received an email that same evening informing us that commercial activity on residential property is prohibited without prior written consent. She wasn't even charging money. It was free lemonade with paper cups decorated in stickers and smiley faces. But that didn't matter. Not here. Not to Karen. The tension wasn't just about us. It was about her. Emily, a sweet, disabled child who had never done anything wrong. And Karen's disdain for her presence was becoming impossible to ignore. One morning, Emily was excited to hand out small handmade invitations for her upcoming birthday party at school. I helped her write them, decorate them, and pack them in her backpack. We decided to give one to the neighboring kids as well, just in case they wanted to join. When we left a card at Karen's door, addressed simply to any neighborhood kids, she returned it. Not to me, but to Emily. She handed it directly to her the next day, kneeling down and saying, "Sweetheart, I'm afraid this won't be possible. We don't do large gatherings in our circle. It's not suitable." Emily just stared, clutching the card like it had been slapped out of her hand. Karen stood up and walked away without looking at me. I fought back tears as I bent down beside my daughter, who whispered, "Did I do something wrong?" I shook my head and held her. "No, baby, not a thing." There's a way some people say everything while pretending they've said nothing at all. Karen had mastered it. She smiled in public, nodded during HOA meetings, and waved at certain neighbors with exaggerated warmth. But when it came to us, our family, our daughter, there was a chill in her tone and an edge in her eyes. I noticed that some neighbors began to follow her lead. The Taylors, who once waved every morning, stopped making eye contact. The Ramirezes declined our invitation to Emily's party with an awkward apology. You know how things are around here. And things were starting to become very clear. This wasn't about policy. This wasn't about harmony or order. It was about exclusion, masked behind the veil of decorum. Karen didn't just want rules, she wanted control. And she saw our daughter's joy, her uniqueness, her mere presence as a disruption. Something was building, and it wasn't just neighborly tension. It was a storm waiting to break, and deep down, I knew Karen wasn't finished. Not even close. From the moment Emily turned a corner into her 7th year, she talked about only one thing: her birthday. Not toys, not the cake, but being celebrated, really celebrated. In her own home, in her own yard, with kids and balloons and music and ponies. Yes, ponies. That was her biggest wish. She had seen a video of a therapy pony group visiting a children's hospital, and since then she had whispered the same dream into every bedtime prayer. I hope the ponies come to my birthday. I didn't know how to explain to her that our life wasn't the kind where wishes came true just because they were beautiful. But this time, I wanted to change that. I wanted her to have something that didn't feel limited or less or compromised. I wanted her to experience the kind of birthday little girls remember when they're older, when they need to remind themselves they mattered once. So I started planning months ahead. I reached out to Tiny Hooves Therapy, the same group from the video, and when they replied that yes, they could send 2 gentle ponies for 30 minutes of hugs and photos, I cried. I actually cried. They even offered to braid the ponies' manes with pink and purple ribbons, Emily's favorite colors. I kept it a secret from her. I told her we'd have a party, but not everything, because surprises make birthdays feel like magic. She had her own ideas, of course. She drew crayon layouts of where she wanted things, her pretend party maps with areas labeled cake spot, music corner, and gifts hill, a little mound in our backyard she loved to sit on. She picked a magical garden theme, complete with butterflies, unicorns, and glitter. She wanted flower crowns for everyone. We ordered some off Etsy and made the rest ourselves. She designed the invitations herself, too, hand-drawn cards with sparkles glued on and her big looping letters that read, "Please come to my birthday. There will be cupcakes and fun, and I'll be so happy if you come." We sent those invitations to her classmates, a few family friends, and against my instincts to a few neighborhood kids, too. I didn't want her to feel like she had to exclude people based on adult tensions. I thought maybe if they saw her joy, maybe if they saw what a sweet, radiant little soul she was, they'd melt a little. Maybe even Karen. I even mailed a formal notification to the HOA, per their event policy, detailing the date, time, and the short appearance of the therapy ponies. I checked every box, every rule. The response came back like a robot wrote it. Approved. Please ensure traffic and noise are kept to a minimum. Emily was ecstatic. Every day after school, she'd ask if it was almost birthday day. She made countdown chains, cut construction paper into little numbers, and danced in the kitchen with excitement. I watched her glow in a way I hadn't seen in so long. It had been a hard year, too many doctor visits, one surgery, a long stretch where she couldn't attend school in person. But now this party felt like her moment to step back into the light. Her grandparents shipped in her gifts early. A soft dollhouse for my mother, built with big open doors, so she could easily play with it from her wheelchair. Her uncle sent a box of new storybooks and a unicorn hoodie that lit up along the seams. Every gift had thoughtfulness poured into it, a level of attention Emily wasn't used to receiving from the world outside our family. She lined them up in the sunroom and talked to them like they were already part of her celebration. "You're gonna love the party," she whispered to one of her dolls. "We're gonna have cupcakes and dancing, and there will be no mean people." I remember those words. There will be no mean people. She said it like a promise, like a hope so sacred she didn't even realize it could be broken. We spent the whole week leading up to the party preparing. My husband took time off work to help set up the backyard. We hung soft streamers from the trees, rented a few small chairs and tables for the kids, and even bought fairy lights to hang around the fence. I ordered special cupcakes with edible glitter and butterflies made of rice paper. Emily and I picked out music together, mostly upbeat songs from her favorite shows, and we made a playlist called Emily's Magical Garden Jams. She added the Z at the end herself, giggling like she was in on a joke with the universe. The night before her birthday, she couldn't sleep. She lay in bed buzzing with excitement, whispering to her stuffed unicorn, "Do you think they like me? Will they dance with me?" I brushed her hair and told her yes, yes, of course. They already do, baby. Her big eyes sparkled in the dark and she whispered, "I think I'm going to feel normal tomorrow. I think I'm going to feel like I belong." She squeezed my hand and added, "For real this time." That's when the lump formed in my throat. Because that word, belong, it held so much weight, so much history, and so much hunger. Kids like Emily, kids who are different, often spend their lives on the edge of circles, trying to earn invitations to spaces that should have welcomed them by default. And here she was, just a child, hoping this birthday might be her doorway into inclusion, that maybe, just maybe, people would see her as whole, as worthy, not because she fought for it, but because she simply was. I went to bed that night filled with both joy and worry. Joy that she was happy, worry that the world often finds a way to dim the light of children like her when they shine too brightly. I tried to push the doubt away. I told myself we had followed every rule, filed every form, been kind, been generous, been quiet, been everything this neighborhood required of us. I prayed that it would be enough, that maybe even Karen could set aside whatever icy judgment she held and let a little girl have her day. But in my heart, I sensed it, that under the clean lawns and neat mailboxes, under the HOA newsletters and neighborly nods, something ugly was still festering, something intolerant, something petty, something afraid of difference. Emily went to sleep smiling that night, dreaming of ponies and cupcakes and glittering crowns. She said she finally felt included, finally loved, but Karen made sure it wouldn't last. It started 5 days before the party. That was when the first crack appeared, subtle, quiet, but unmistakably intentional. I was sipping coffee that morning, watching Emily color in her guest badges for the party, when the email landed in my inbox. Subject: Reminder of community event regulations. The message was polite, corporate, sterile. It began with "Dear Resident" and continued with a bullet point list of expectations. No amplified sound, no commercial activities, traffic control, limited guest count, and strict adherence to curbside parking policies. I reread it 3 times before realizing it was clearly aimed at us. We were the only ones hosting an event that weekend. The timing was too precise. They didn't mention us by name, but they didn't need to. I'd filed the birthday plans weeks ago. This wasn't a reminder, it was a warning. I responded professionally, reiterating that our event was a private, brief children's gathering with under 20 guests, scheduled well within daytime hours. I received no reply, but an hour later, a printed version of the same rules was taped to our front door. No note, just scotch-taped boldface control in 12-point font. Emily saw it before I did. She held it up, her little brow furrowed. "Did we do something bad, Mommy?" I smiled the best fake smile I could and said, "No, baby, just silly rules." But inside, I was already preparing for the next strike. That evening, Karen stopped by. She didn't ask, she announced her presence, appearing just outside our porch like a shadow cast at the edge of decency. "Evening," she said crisply. She was holding a clipboard, which she never looked at. It was just a prop, something to make her intrusion feel official. "Just following up on your event." She said the word event like it was a disease. I nodded. "Everything's been cleared with the HOA. We're good to go." She nodded slowly, eyes scanning our porch like she was doing inventory. "It's just, these types of things can disturb the peace. Kids, noise, parking. Not everyone appreciates that kind of chaos in their environment. Chaos. That word again. I stared at her, keeping my voice even. It's a birthday party, Karen. For a little girl who's been through a lot. She gave me a polite smile that didn't touch her eyes. We all have our burdens, she said, but this is a community. Harmony matters. Then she walked away. No goodbye, just the click of her heels on pavement and the quiet message she left behind. You are not welcome to take up space here. Still, we pressed on. Emily's joy was too bright to dim. She spent that night painting signs for the party. Welcome friends, cupcake corner, pony snuggles here. She didn't know the war waging just beyond her awareness. She didn't see how the adults in her world were building walls where bridges should have been. The next morning, we went outside to find the balloon arch Emily and I had finished the day before popped. All of it, dozens of pastel-colored balloons, shredded, limp on the grass like deflated dreams. The string was intact. The frame stood untouched. But every single balloon had been carefully punctured. Not slashed, poked. Not the work of wind, weather, or animals. This was deliberate, controlled, human. Emily stared at it for a long time without saying a word. Then she asked, "Can we fix it?" I knelt beside her and nodded. "Yes, baby. We always fix it." That day I bought new balloons. Stronger ones. We spent the afternoon rebuilding the arch, this time placing it inside until the morning of the party. I sent an email to the HOA board, politely requesting that if there were any concerns about vandalism in the neighborhood, they should consider reviewing local camera footage. I received no response. 2 days before the party, I began receiving text messages from parents of the children Emily had invited. One by one, they canceled. "Hey, so sorry. Something came up. We'd love to come, but can't make it now, conflict with soccer. So, bummed to miss it. Rain check." Something was off. These were friends who had enthusiastically RSVP'd just a week earlier. I called one of them, a mother named Claire, who had always been kind. There was a long pause on the line before she whispered, "I don't want to be involved in anything political." I got a call from someone on the HOA. They made it sound like your party wasn't properly cleared. I felt my stomach drop, but it was cleared, I said. She sounded truly apologetic. "I know. I'm so sorry. I just don't want to start anything." Start anything. As if celebrating a little girl's birthday was a declaration of war. But that's what Karen had turned it into, a conflict. She had poisoned the air with enough quiet intimidation that people were folding without even realizing it. She was orchestrating a silent sabotage, one polite phone call at a time, and it was working, but not on me. The night before the party, I sat on the porch, surrounded by decorations, cake boxes, and party supplies, feeling the weight of it all. My husband joined me, holding 2 cups of tea. "Still want to do this?" he asked gently. I looked back at the living room window, where Emily was dancing in her unicorn hoodie, giggling at her own reflection. "More than ever," I said, "because this isn't just about cake and ponies. It's about showing her that she belongs, even if no one else wants her to." We decided not to scale anything back. If people didn't come, so be it. If Karen tried to interfere again, she'd be dealing with the strength of 2 parents who had fought far harder battles than nasty notes and deflated balloons. We hung the streamers. We finished the signs. We assembled the gift table with care. My sister drove in from 3 hours away just to make sure Emily had someone clapping for her when she blew out her candles. My brother prepped the camera to capture every moment, and we ordered more cupcakes than we needed because we believe deep down that maybe, just maybe, some neighbors would show up. Maybe joy would be louder than hate. As I tucked Emily in that night, she whispered, "I'm so excited I might not sleep." I smiled and brushed her hair back. "Then we'll just have to start the party earlier." She giggled, pulled her unicorn plush close, and closed her eyes. Outside, in the dark, I thought I heard a car engine idle just a bit too long in front of our house. I peeked through the blinds and saw Karen's porch light flick off. The storm was coming, but we were ready. It was supposed to be the happiest day of her life. The sun rose gently that morning, as if it too had accepted the invitation to Emily's magical garden party. The backyard was blooming with streamers and laughter. The ponies had arrived right on time, braided, gentle, and docile as they trotted in with handlers smiling wide. And Emily, in her glittery lavender dress, was glowing brighter than I'd ever seen her. She wheeled herself from corner to corner, giggling, handing out flower crowns, hugging her cousins, and showing off her gifts hill, where a pile of beautifully wrapped boxes sat waiting beside the garden arch. For a few precious hours, everything was perfect. The kind of perfect you only get once in a childhood. We'd set up stations, cupcake decorating under the shade tent, music softly playing near the fence line, a picnic blanket where my husband read picture books to the younger kids. My sister was helping with the camera, snapping candids of Emily petting the ponies, laughing in a circle of classmates, pointing excitedly at the butterfly cake topped with her name. And then I stepped into the kitchen for just 5 minutes to cut and plate the first slice. Just 5 minutes. That's when I heard it. A scream, sharp, high, and terrified. Then another. Then several. The kind of sound that stills your blood. My stomach dropped, the knife in my hand falling to the floor with a dull clang. I bolted through the patio door, adrenaline choking my breath, pushing through children and adults frozen mid-play. Smoke, thick and black, rising in lazy curls from the front of the house. I rounded the corner with my heart in my throat, and that's when I saw it. The gifts, her gifts, were on fire. The entire pile, all those beautifully wrapped boxes tied with sparkly bows and love, now engulfed in flames. The driveway shimmered with melting plastic, scorched ribbons, and curling paper that danced through the air like ashes of memory. Emily was already there, sobbing on her knees, her walker tossed to the side, her arms shaking as she reached out toward the blaze. "My unicorn, Mommy, my unicorn," she wailed. Her favorite gift, a custom plush sent from her cousin overseas, lay half-consumed in the fire, its purple fur blackened and smoking. I ran to her, scooping her into my arms, holding her trembling body against mine as if I could shield her from the sight. But how do you shield a child from something this cruel? This deliberate? I was still trying to register the horror when I heard the voice, her voice, calm, callous, void of even the pretense of decency. "She doesn't deserve them," Karen said, standing at the edge of the sidewalk with her arms folded tightly across her chest. "You people are ruining the neighborhood." The world tilted. My ears rang. I could barely see through the rage flooding my vision. "What did you just say?" I asked, breathless, not even recognizing the sound of my own voice. Karen looked me dead in the eyes, her face as smooth as glass. "You heard me," she replied. "This chaos, this spectacle, it's not appropriate for our community. Maybe now you'll understand." "You set fire to a child's birthday gifts," I said, still clutching Emily, whose body was trembling uncontrollably in my arms. "You burned them." "I didn't do anything," Karen snapped, her expression shifting just slightly, her tone falling into the dangerous rhythm of rehearsed innocence. "I walked outside and found it like this. Probably a candle from your little event gone wrong. Maybe you should have supervised more closely." Neighbors began to gather. Some lingered at their fences, others stood on their porches with phones in hand, not filming, not helping, just watching, waiting to see if this moment would collapse under its own weight or ignite something greater. One man called 911. Another woman ushered her kids back inside. No one came forward. No one stood beside us. Not yet. The fire truck came within minutes, hosing down the smoldering mess as foam and steam swallowed the last of Emily's gifts. The air stank of plastic and betrayal. Emily whimpered, burying her face into my chest. "Why did she hate me?" she whispered. "What did I do wrong?" I broke, not just emotionally, viscerally. My knees gave out, collapsing onto the pavement with my daughter in my lap, sobbing into her hair, while the last pieces of her joy burned to nothing behind us. There was nothing I could say that would make sense, nothing that would explain to a 7-year-old why being different had made her a target, why kindness hadn't been enough, why doing everything right still hadn't protected her. Police arrived soon after, but predictably, there were no witnesses. Karen played the role of concerned neighbor perfectly. "I was just passing by when I saw the flames," she said. "I'm as shocked as anyone. Maybe one of the children played with a sparkler?" Her lies flowed effortlessly, and no one contradicted her. Not one of the neighbors standing nearby offered the truth. Not one of them had the courage. It was easier to remain silent, to remain neutral, than to take a side, even when the victim was a disabled child, and the crime was as obvious as the chard remains now soaking in puddles of melted wrapping paper and foam. I gave the officers our statements. I pointed out the timeline, the sabotage leading up to this, the notes, the deflated balloons, the HOA interference, the sudden cancellations. But without evidence, it was all smoke. All that mattered now was what they could prove. Emily was inconsolable. She asked if her birthday was over, if the ponies would still come. I lied, told her they had to go back early, but that they were so proud to meet her, that they told me she was the kindest girl they'd ever met, that they left her a birthday wish. She nodded silently, trying so hard to be brave, even as tears slid down her cheeks and her shoulders shook in little silent sobs. We brought her inside, wrapped her in a blanket, and tried to salvage what we could. But you can't undo something like that. You can't unsee your daughter's birthday presents, her joy, set on fire in front of her. You can't unhear the words, "She doesn't deserve them." That moment, those 5 words, sear themselves into my memory like the flames on our driveway. My sister later told me she had seen Karen walking briskly down the side of our yard just before the screams. She hadn't thought much of it at the time, just another one of Karen's monitoring laps. But she hadn't filmed it. No proof, just suspicion. Just what we all already knew, but couldn't show the world. As night fell, we tucked Emily into bed, lying beside her until her breathing steadied and her little hand went limp in mine. Her birthday was over, but not in the way it should have been. There were no glowing memories, no laughter to replay in her mind. Only smoke, ashes, and the weight of a question no child should ever have to ask. Why would someone hate me just for being me? I stood in the doorway, watching her sleep, the hallway light casting a soft shadow across her face. And I realized something deep inside me had shifted. Something fundamental. It wasn't anger. It was resolve. A mother's kind of resolve. The kind that doesn't scream or curse, but builds. That learns every policy, every code. That finds every crack in the system and widens it. That doesn't just fight back, but rebuilds better. That moment broke something in me I can never describe, and it rebuilt something far more dangerous in its place. I wasn't afraid of Karen anymore. She should have been afraid of me. The smoke had barely cleared when the gaslighting began. The morning after Emily's birthday inferno, I opened my email to a message from the HOA. The subject line was simple: community incident clarification. But the content boiled my blood. It read, "We regret the unfortunate events that occurred on your property during the private gathering. After speaking with residents and reviewing neighborhood guidelines, it appears there may have been a miscommunication regarding the safety protocols for such events. Please be assured that the HOA is committed to maintaining harmony and safety in our community." Miscommunication. That was their word for it. Like her birthday gifts had caught fire because we misunderstood a memo. Like our daughter hadn't screamed and sobbed in front of a burning pile of her joy. I stared at the screen in disbelief. Nowhere in the email did they mention the fire directly. Nowhere did they acknowledge that someone had said it intentionally. No apology. No investigation. Just that word again, harmony, as if we had disrupted it by daring to celebrate a disabled child's life out loud, as if the fault rested somewhere on us, in our failure to stay quiet and invisible. I hit reply and typed a long, composed, factual response detailing everything we had done right. The permits, the emails, the photos, the timeline. I asked pointedly if there was any update on the footage from the community entrance camera. I didn't expect an answer, and I didn't get one. The police followed up once, only to confirm that without witnesses or video proof, they couldn't pursue charges. They called it suspicious, but inconclusive. Karen had, of course, spoken to them. She described herself as a concerned resident who had tried to help manage the situation, as if she'd bravely run toward the fire instead of watching it burn with folded arms and a twisted sense of satisfaction. The officers told me she denied any involvement, claimed she was inside her home until the moment she stepped outside to investigate the smoke. I asked if anyone checked her porch camera or if anyone else had footage. They shrugged. Most neighbors we spoke to didn't see anything, one of them said. Some didn't want to comment. Of course they didn't. The silence from the neighborhood was deafening. People who once waved at us from their lawns now looked the other way. A few parents from Emily's school messaged brief, awkward apologies, how they wished they could have come, how things just got weird so fast, how they hoped everything was okay. But no one brought dinner. No one knocked on the door. No one offered to help clean the mess still smeared across our driveway like a scar. It was as if our pain had made us radioactive, too dangerous to associate with, too inconvenient to acknowledge. Karen, meanwhile, returned to her daily routines as if nothing had happened. She watered her hydrangeas. She took slow, deliberate walks around the block. She even had the audacity to send us a printed notice folded inside our mailbox 2 days later, reminding us that residue from burnt material on shared driveways is a code violation and should be promptly addressed. No signature. No humanity. Emily refused to come out of her room. The pony she'd adored now made her cry. Her flower crown lay wilted on her nightstand, untouched. When I brought her meals, she picked at them silently. When I tried to talk, she looked past me. The light that had filled her for weeks had vanished, swallowed by something far heavier than sadness, shame. Not the kind that comes from doing something wrong, but the kind forced on you when someone decides you're not worthy of joy. Not even on your birthday. Every attempt to cheer her up felt hollow. Can we do a redo? I asked one evening, sitting beside her with a new party hat in my hand. She didn't look at me. What if we had a private one? Just us. Cake and cartoons, and she burned my unicorn, Emily whispered. Her voice was so soft I barely caught it. She burned it, and no one stopped her. I held her then, tight as I could without crushing her, wishing I could absorb every ounce of that pain. But how do you explain to a child that sometimes people are cruel and cowardly, and sometimes they get away with it? I began documenting everything, screenshots of emails, photos of the damage, statements from my sister and brother, even the timeline of our communications with the HOA. I didn't know what I'd do with it yet. Maybe file a civil complaint. Maybe go public. But I knew this couldn't disappear quietly. Not again. Not like every other act of veiled hatred that gets buried under bureaucracy and fear. This wasn't just bullying. This was soul-level cruelty, the kind that tells a child they're too much of an inconvenience to celebrate, that their joy threatens order, that their mere existence disturbs the neighborhood. It took all the strength I had to act normal in front of Emily. I still made her pancakes. I still braided her hair. But inside, I was unraveling. Every time I passed Karen's house, I felt the weight of injustice pressing down on me like a stone on my chest. And every time I looked at the scorched pavement, I had to swallow the scream that kept rising in my throat. I knew now what we were really up against. It wasn't just Karen. It was the silence that protected her, the HOA that excused her, the neighbors who turned away, the system that required proof to acknowledge harm, but no proof at all to dismiss it. That was the monster. That was the enemy. And it had 100 faces. But I also knew this. We were not powerless. Because they thought setting fire to a pile of gifts would break us. They thought gaslighting us into doubt would silence us. They thought that by isolating us, they'd erase us. They were wrong. What they ignited wasn't fear, it was fire. And we were just getting started. The fight didn't begin with shouting or threats. It began quietly with a file folder, a shaking pen, and the firm grip of a lawyer who didn't flinch when I told him the truth. We'd been to the police. We'd spoken to the HOA. We'd endured silence, polite deflection, and thinly veiled blame. But I wasn't letting this fade into another unfortunate misunderstanding. No, this wasn't going to die with the ashes on our driveway. This was war now, fought not with fists, but with evidence, pressure, and persistence. And I was ready. I found the lawyer through a friend of a friend, someone who had worked on discrimination cases involving HOA abuse before. His name was Lucas Roth, and when I told him what happened, he didn't blink. He nodded slowly and said, "This isn't new, but if we can get proof, we can build pressure." HOA boards only respond to exposure. That word, exposure, hit something deep in me. That's what Karen feared. Not confrontation. Not justice. Exposure. People like her lived behind the illusion of civility. If that cracked, her power would collapse. We started gathering everything: emails, incident reports, photos, screenshots of messages, the community reminder she taped to our door, the string of text cancellations from parents, even the original event approval from HOA. We documented every piece of sabotage, every passive-aggressive note, every coded phrase Karen had used in conversations. We printed copies, highlighted patterns. Lucas said we had a strong case for community harassment, possible discrimination, and targeted abuse under fair housing laws if we could prove Karen was the one who started the fire. For weeks, that was our missing link. I didn't need proof to know it was her. I'd seen the look in her eyes. I'd heard the words leave her mouth. But the legal system required more than gut instinct and community whispers. It needed undeniable, visible, irrefutable truth. And then, one afternoon, my phone rang. It was Tasha, a woman down the block who I barely knew beyond casual nods during trash day. Her voice was low, almost nervous. "I don't want to get involved," she said, "but I think you should see something." She explained that her home security camera, positioned to monitor her side yard, also caught a partial view of the street in front of our house. She'd just reviewed the footage from Emily's birthday morning. "I didn't realize what it was until now," she said. "I drove there immediately." We sat in her living room while she queued up the footage. The timestamp was 10:18 a.m., about 45 minutes before the fire. The screen showed Karen's unmistakable figure, wearing a wide sun hat and garden gloves, dragging 2 black trash bags toward the edge of her property. One of the bags was heavy. She pulled it with both hands. She paused, glanced around, then disappeared from view. 2 minutes later, she reappeared without the bags. My breath caught. The time, the direction, her secrecy, it aligned perfectly. She wasn't headed to the bin behind her garage. She was headed toward our yard, toward the gifts. Lucas's face lit up when I showed him. "This," he said, "is gold." It wasn't full-on arson footage, but it was enough to destroy her innocence narrative. We now had visual evidence placing her in close proximity to the scene with suspicious behavior just before the fire. And more importantly, we had someone brave enough to speak up. But not everyone was thrilled. The moment our legal complaint was filed, the HOA snapped into defense mode. They issued a formal statement to the community email list, carefully worded and lawyer-approved. The HOA is aware of recent allegations being made by a resident and assures all homeowners that we are committed to fairness, neutrality, and the well-being of our community. We encourage residents not to speculate and to allow the proper processes to unfold. That same day, Karen sent out her own email, dripping with condescension. "It's unfortunate that personal grievances are being turned into public drama. Let's all remember to remain civil and respectful even when emotions run high." That email was her dog whistle, and some neighbors heard it loud and clear. Suddenly, people who had once been friendly became icy. The Ramirezes, who used to chat with us on walks, now avoided eye contact. The Johnsons moved their bench from the front porch to the backyard. A neighbor named Craig even confronted my husband at the mailbox. "Are you trying to sue the whole neighborhood now? You think your kid is the only one who deserves to feel special?" The words hit like a slap. Craig didn't care that a child had been traumatized. He cared that we were making noise, challenging the order, refusing to quietly disappear. But not everyone turned away. Some, like Tasha, came forward quietly. Another woman, Megan, left flowers on our porch with a handwritten note. "I'm sorry I didn't say something sooner. I believe you. Let me know if you need anything." A young couple sent cupcakes for Emily, along with a letter for the HOA board urging them to take action. The community began to split, not just politically but morally. Lines were drawn between those who prioritized peace and those who stood for justice. And Karen? She doubled down. She filed a countercomplaint against us, citing defamation and character attacks. She claimed she was being harassed, that her property had been photographed without permission, that her privacy was being violated. It was a desperate move, and Lucas said as much. They always flip it when you get too close to the truth, he told me. But don't back down. This is the storm. Let it rage. Emily still didn't fully understand what was happening. She knew her gifts were gone. She knew people were arguing. She didn't know we were taking on a system built to protect people, like Karen, at the expense of people like her. But every night, she asked me the same question: will my next birthday be safe? And I answered her the same way every time. Yes, because we're making sure of it. The fight wasn't just about a fire. It was about control, about who's allowed to take up space in a neighborhood, about whose happiness matters, about who gets to define what's appropriate and what's not. And most of all, it was about what happens when good people refuse to be silent anymore. We had the footage, we had the lawyer, we had the truth. Now, we had a community dividing in real time, some protecting the lie, others rallying for justice. The fire may have burned Emily's gifts, but it ignited something far more powerful in us, a refusal to be erased. And Karen? She had no idea that this time, her match had lit a wildfire she couldn't control. I wasn't looking for a twist. I just wanted justice. But as we continued digging, turning over every rock the HOA had hoped would remain buried, what we uncovered wasn't just a neighbor with too much time and too little empathy. We found rot, deep, old, institutional rot, hiding behind manicured lawns and flowerbed rules. And at the center of it all was Karen. It started with a slip from a former resident. I received a message on social media one evening from a woman named Brenda Morales, someone I didn't recognize, who wrote, "I used to live on Willow Ridge Lane. I saw your story. You're not the first, and you won't be the last. Be careful. She's connected." That last sentence chilled me. I called her immediately. Brenda told me that she and her husband had moved into the neighborhood 5 years ago, full of optimism, much like we had. Within 6 months, they were buried in HOA notices, complaints about paint colors, flag placements, fence heights, and even how their child's bike was left visible from the street. All traced back to Karen. It was like she took a personal interest in us, Brenda said, especially when she found out we were immigrants. She never said anything directly, of course, but the tone, the looks, the implications, it was all there. But here's what stunned me. Brenda and her husband had fought back, filed formal complaints with the HOA board, cited bias and abuse of power. And their response? Silence. Then escalation. The board began fining them for violations no one else was being cited for. Contractors started backing out of jobs on their home. Social events dried up. Finally, a friend of Brenda's pulled her aside and whispered, "You know Karen's brother sits on the board, right? He basically runs it." Brenda and her husband sold their home within a year of filing that complaint. I immediately brought this to Lucas, my attorney. He raised an eyebrow. Family connections on the board? That's conflict of interest 101. If we can prove it, we don't just have harassment. We have systemic cover-up. So we started pulling public records, past HOA board rosters, meeting minutes, voting logs. And there it was, clear as day. Dennis Hartford. Karen's maiden name was Karen Hartford. Dennis had been on the board for 9 years, including during the years Brenda lived there. His name appeared in every policy update, every decision, every fine. But it didn't stop there. We found at least 3 more families who had sold and left the community under suspiciously similar conditions: sudden fines, intense scrutiny, neighborhood ostracization. Each had filed formal complaints. Each had mysteriously disappeared from the HOA public record before any resolution. Their stories aligned. The same cold intimidation, the same Karen-shaped pattern. She pretended to just be a concerned neighbor, one former resident said, but the truth is, she ran this place like her personal kingdom. What chilled me the most, though, came from an anonymous letter I received, left in our mailbox without postage or return address. Just a folded sheet of lined paper with shaky handwriting. She burned a girl's bike once, in her last neighborhood. No one could prove it, but we all knew. Be careful. She's done this before. We traced that tip back to a neighborhood she lived in prior to Willow Ridge, Heather Hills. And sure enough, through archived HOA meeting notes available online, we found a small mention from 7 years ago, ongoing issues with resident K. H and continued complaints regarding harassment of neighbors, advised to seek voluntary resolution. K. H was Karen. She'd left Heather Hills shortly after that meeting and purchased the home on our street. And here, she'd done it again. Only this time, her tactics escalated from complaints to full-on destruction. Only this time, someone was documenting everything. But none of this was public. None of it had ever been brought forward in a way that held her accountable. Why? Because Karen was never just a neighbor. She was a bully protected by power. Her brother gave her influence. Her performative politeness gave her cover. And the HOA? They didn't want drama. They wanted compliance. Peace at any cost, even if that meant protecting the arsonist over the child she hurt. We filed an ethics complaint with the state HOA regulatory board. We submitted every shred of evidence, including the conflict of interest, the past complaints, and the new footage placing Karen at the scene of our daughter's ruined birthday. The board responded with generic language, "Thank you for bringing this matter to our attention. We will review it promptly." But we knew better. We'd seen how systems like these protected their own. So we went public. Lucas helped us craft a careful press release and pitch it to several local news stations. Within a week, the story hit the airwaves. Family alleges HOA harassment after disabled daughter's birthday gifts burned. Resident tied to prior complaints. It spread like wildfire. Suddenly, the silence that had hung heavy over our community fractured. Neighbors began asking questions, some with concern, others with shame. Former residents began coming forward online, anonymously at first, then braver, naming names. The image of Willow Ridge as a peaceful suburban enclave began to crack, and through the fissures, the truth began to pour out. Karen stopped walking the block. Her porch lights went dark. Her carefully trimmed bushes grew wild. The HOA stopped responding to our emails entirely, handing everything over to their attorney. But it was too late. The damage was done. The illusion was broken. The twist in all of this wasn't just Karen's past. It was the realization that she'd been allowed, enabled to do it again and again. Because people looked the other way. Because fear kept mouths shut. Because someone like her knew exactly how far she could go before anyone dared to push back. But this time, she went too far. This time, the victim wasn't just a family. It was a child. And this time, someone stood up. We weren't just fighting for Emily anymore. We were fighting for every family who had been told they didn't belong. And for the first time, they were fighting with us. The HOA meeting room wasn't made for confrontation. It was designed to be neutral, sterile, fluorescent lights, beige walls, stiff chairs arranged in 2 perfect rows, and a long table up front where the board sat like judges. It was where landscaping guidelines were debated and seasonal decor timelines enforced. It was not meant to host a reckoning. But that night, that's exactly what it became. We arrived early, not to make a scene, but to be seen, to let them know we weren't hiding. Emily sat beside me in her chair, her lavender headband holding back her curls, a handmade sign resting in her lap. In crayon, she'd written the question that still haunted her, "Do I deserve joy?" I didn't ask her to write it. She did that herself. And when I asked if she wanted to hold it at the meeting, she nodded without hesitation. The room filled slowly at first, neighbors trickling in, cautious, whispering. Then reporters arrived. Lucas had made sure the media knew about the meeting, and a local news crew was setting up a small camera in the back. The HOA board looked nervous. Dennis Hartford, Karen's brother, sat rigid in the center, eyes fixed forward, trying to act composed, but his fingers twitched against the table. Karen wasn't at the board table. She sat in the front row of the audience, 2 seats from the aisle, back perfectly straight, lips pursed, gaze cold. When she saw Emily's sign, her jaw tightened. But she said nothing. The meeting opened with routine announcements, new landscaping bids, community garden volunteer hours. People pretended to care. But everyone in that room knew why they were really there. Then it was time for community concerns. Lucas stood first, calm, measured. "I'm here representing the Marsh family," he said. "I'd like to formally address the incident involving the sabotage of their daughter's birthday party and the pattern of targeted harassment they've endured within this HOA." Whispers broke out across the room. A few neighbors gasped. Karen shifted in her seat, but still didn't speak. Lucas continued. "We have documented evidence of threats, interference, and finally, arson. We also have footage from a neighbor's security camera that places Ms. Karen Hartford at the scene of the fire moments before it occurred. And now, we'll play that footage for everyone." The board stammered. This isn't standard. This is a public forum," Lucas said firmly. "And this is evidence the community deserves to see." The footage played on a mounted monitor. Karen's silhouette dragging trash bags down her side yard. The disappearance into the blind spot. The reappearance empty-handed. The timestamp. The undeniable implication. The room fell into a heavy silence. You could feel it. A shift. A crack. Then I stood. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I just spoke. That pile she dragged out? Those were my daughter's birthday gifts. They were set on fire less than an hour later. No one helped us. No one believed us. Until now. I turned to Emily. She held up her sign. Her hand trembled slightly, but she held it high. Do I deserve joy? For a moment, the room stopped breathing. An elderly neighbor in the third row, Mrs. Langston, a retired schoolteacher, began to cry. She covered her mouth, then stood up. "I remember that girl's laughter that day," she said softly. "I remember thinking how nice it was to hear children in the neighborhood again. I didn't say anything when the fire happened. And I should have. That broke the dam." Others began to speak. A young couple stood and apologized for canceling at the last minute. A teenager said he'd seen Karen walking away from our yard that morning but had been too afraid to come forward. Someone else spoke about the old complaints. The pattern. The fear. The unspoken rule, don't cross Karen. And then, finally Karen stood. Her voice was sharp. "This is a smear campaign," she snapped. "You're letting emotion override reason. That video proves nothing. I did not start a fire. I am not a villain just because I care about standards." Lucas cut in smoothly. "You're entitled to a defense, Ms. Hartford, but we have a right to the truth, and the community has a right to accountability." Dennis tried to shut it all down. "Let's table this until legal counsel," but Mrs. Langston interrupted. "No, not this time. No more silence." The board huddled. For several tense minutes they whispered, papers shuffled, hands pointed. Then the HOA president, a quiet man who had said nothing all night, stood and cleared his throat. Effective immediately, he said, voice shaking, "Ms. Hartford is suspended from participating in HOA affairs pending further investigation. Furthermore, we will be reviewing all recent enforcement actions and reopening closed complaints. And beginning this month, we will revise our event policies to ensure accessibility, inclusion, and protection for all residents." The room erupted in quiet murmurs. Karen sat back down, stunned. Her power, at least for now, was broken. I turned to Emily. "They heard you," I whispered. She looked up at me with wide eyes. "Did I do something good?" I kissed her forehead. "You did something brave." We left the meeting as a family, not triumphant, but whole. We hadn't erased the damage. We hadn't undone the fire, but we dragged the truth into the light, and in doing so, reclaimed a piece of joy that had been stolen from a little girl who just wanted to feel like she belonged. It wasn't a total victory, but it was a beginning. The next birthday was quieter, smaller. No ponies, no big plans, no invitations mailed to the neighborhood. Just family, a few close friends. A cake made entirely by Emily's request, half chocolate, half strawberry, with a unicorn drawn in frosting that looked more like a sleepy dog, but she loved it anyway. There were gifts, but none stacked on a hill. No balloons arching through the yard. No banners. And still she smiled. Not just the polite kind, the real kind. The kind that reaches the eyes, that carries healing in its curve. It took a year to reach that smile. A long, complicated year. But it came. Emily had to relearn how to feel safe again. It wasn't immediate. There were months when the sound of a balloon popping made her flinch, when the mention of parties brought silence. For a long time, she refused to speak about her 7th birthday at all, like it was a story she wanted to lock in a box and never reopen. Therapy helped. So did art. She painted every day, colorful skies, animals with wings, happy kids on clouds. I noticed how many of them held signs that read things like "Welcome" and "You Matter." She was working through it the way kids do, in symbols, in stories, in soft-spoken resilience. And we let her. We followed her pace. We stayed in the same house. Some people thought we wouldn't, that we'd pack up and run like others before us. But this was Emily's home, our home, and we weren't going to be chased out by a coward with matches and a clipboard. In the months that followed the public HOA meeting, Karen resigned from a board entirely. The community changed. Not overnight, but enough to feel it. New policies were adopted. Complaints required transparency and signatures. Events were given more freedom. Children were welcomed into spaces where they once only barely belonged. Neighbors who had once looked away now waved again. Some even apologized. Others simply brought cookies or left handwritten notes, quiet admissions of guilt or maybe regret. Karen eventually moved. Her house went on the market quietly. No farewell gathering. No statements. Just a moving truck and silence. I watched from the window as she loaded her final box into the car, never once looking our way. She left without a word, and we let her go without one. But Emily noticed. "She's gone," she whispered to me that evening, standing by the window with her arms crossed. "Will the new people like birthdays?" I smiled. "If they don't, they'll learn to." And they did. The new neighbors were a retired couple with a love for gardening and, it turns out, a fondness for children. The first thing they did after moving in was invite us for lemonade. A week later, they offered to help set up Emily's mini tea party. Healing, I've learned, isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's just soft, cumulative. One safe neighbor, one honest policy, one kind gesture at a time. Emily's 8th birthday ended with her sitting in the backyard, wearing a handmade flower crown and holding a balloon that said, "I am brave." She looked up at me as the sun began to dip and asked, "Did we win?" And I thought about everything. The fire, the fear, the silence, the fight, the people who stood by us, the ones who didn't, the child who asked the world if she deserved joy and made the world answer. I knelt beside her and said, "Yes, baby, we won, but not just for us." And that's the truth. We didn't just survive it. We changed it. We opened a door that had been closed for years and kept it open so the next child, the next family, would walk through without needing to knock. No one sets joy on fire and walks away without consequence. Because even after the ashes settle, even after the smoke clears, love rebuilds. And this time, it builds stronger. This is our story, but it's not the only one. All across the country, families like ours are being silenced, targeted, and excluded, not because they broke the rules, but because they didn't fit someone else's idea of what belongs. HOA rules should protect communities, not be twisted into tools of cruelty and control. If you've ever felt powerless under the weight of an HOA, if you've ever seen someone abuse authority to hurt others, if your child has ever been made to feel like they didn't deserve happiness, it's time to speak up. Leave a comment. Share your story. Let the world see what happens behind those neighborhood gates. We're done being quiet, and we know we're not alone. Like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And subscribe to HOA Denied Access, where real stories are finally told, where injustice gets called out, and where we fight for the voices that HOAs try to erase. Because when we unite, we don't just survive the system, we dismantle it. Stand with us, speak with us, and never let anyone tell you or your child that they don't deserve joy.